So I want to talk a little bit about the Hawaiian goddesses tonight, just a little, because it's a big subject. And I just want to give you the very briefest of introductions. And I have to start off by telling you that the whole concept of gods and goddesses in Hawaii is not like it is in the Western or most of the Eastern world. It's a very different concept. It's very, very nature-oriented, of course. It's also understood that sometimes these gods and goddesses are invisible and may go elsewhere and come from elsewhere, but it's very nature-oriented. The word for a god or goddess in Hawaiian, it's the same word for any spirit, is akua. And so these are akua. Even the word for God in Christianity today in Hawaiian is akua, although sometimes akua nui, which translates as Great Spirit. But in these other akua, everything has or is an akua. But the ones that they paid more attention to were the ones that had more mana. And that means influence, or more influence or effect on their lives. And so these are the ones that from the Western world we recognize as gods and goddesses. Right? But they used the same word for all of them. The difference was only in their mana, in their power to influence. So I'm going to give you a short list. I'm only going to talk about 7 of them, because we use those 7 when we're doing healing work in our tradition. But there's a lot more, an awful lot more. So this is very condensed. Now, one of the interesting things in Hawaiian tradition is the use of what they call kino lau. Now, a kino lau really means many-bodied. And the idea was that the more money you have, the more, if you like, spiritual power or influence, the more you are able to transform yourself into other forms. So that these major akua had multiple forms that they could take, or multiple forms that represented them. And we're going to start off by talking about one of the oldest of all the goddesses in all of Polynesia, and that's Hina. And sometimes in South Pacific she's known as Ina, and sometimes as Sina. But Hina, by one of those names, she's known everywhere. And she's a representative of feminine wisdom. And of course, she's always considered beautiful when she's in the stories, but it's feminine wisdom that is the predominant characteristic that she has. She has a number of different forms. She's associated with the moon, she's associated with the ocean, and one of her forms is coral. And so this is used often as a representation of Hina. Okay? Hina was a healer. Because of the moon aspect, she also had to do with all of those aspects of femaleness. She was such an ancient goddess that she was known sometimes as the wife, the sister, the mother, or the grandmother of Maui, who was the archetypal shaman in Polynesia. Okay? So she could play any one of those kinds of roles in the stories. There seems to be some very, very ancient relationship with the sun, but that's pretty obscure, because the Polynesians, as we know them today and from anything that we've been able to gather, didn't pay much attention to the sun. I mean, sure, the sun was an akua, but not very important. Didn't play any major roles. And it's as if quite a long time ago there was a shift in religious aspect or orientation away from the sun. But the moon never lost her glamour. The Hawaiians had a lunar calendar, and the moon was extremely important in all the things they did. The sun was there. Okay? Anyway, this is Hina. This is what she did. Now, when we're using her for healing, or any of the goddesses for healing work, you've got to understand, in my tradition, in my family, they did not worship the goddesses. What they did is consider the goddesses as friends. And so they'd call upon these friends, representing various aspects of nature, with the power of those aspects of nature, and they'd call on them to help with healing of different kinds. And so Hina, now the elements used in my family were kind of different. fire, wind, water, stone, plants, animals, and humans. Those are the elements of the earth. But so Hina was water. And that's what she represented. Of course, coral being one of her traditional forms, there's an understandable relationship there. But she's kind of like the one who nourishes, the one who provides, like I said, wisdom, but also nourishment in her healing. When the Hawaiians would go out and pick herbs, they would pick some herbs with the right hand and some herbs with the left hand. And whenever they picked one with the left hand, they would ask for Hina for her help in picking the right herbs. Okay? So this was Hina's area of interest. Now, another one is Haumea. Now, Haumea was also an earth goddess, an alternate name, not also, but she was an earth goddess, an alternate name for one of the earliest forms, which was Papa. Interestingly, Papa was the earth goddess. But one of her names was Haumea. Some of these different names come from different religions that different Polynesians formed. But Haumea was one that's also quite widely known and also very ancient. It's interesting. Hina is a name that means gray, and it has to do with femininity as a name. Haumea does not exist as a name by itself in Hawaiian, but if we take the parts, hau and mea, we can come up with an idea of red or reddish, like the reddishness of the earth, red ruler. And she was the earth goddess, the mother of all things in some of the stories. So her symbol, I'll get it. Her symbol we're using here is a piece of red earth, okay, red lava rock. And red was a principal color. And she had everything to do with family. She had to do with birth and rebirth. And she had to do with, she was called Haumea the eightfold thing, Mea of the 400,000 things. And so she was a great representative of abundance of all kind. So whenever you needed in healing work, remember we're talking about healing mind, body, and circumstances, well, you might ask for the help of Haumea whenever you wanted to increase something or make something more abundant, whatever it was in your life or in the body. Okay? So that's Haumea, another very important one. Now we come to one that you've probably all heard of, and that's Pele. Pele, the volcano goddess. I'll tell you what's in here in a minute. Pele's primary form is fire. That's one of the forms that she takes. She can also take the form of an old woman, a mature woman, or a young maiden. She can take the form of a white dog in some of the traditions. And she's very closely associated with a plant called the ohelo berry that grows on the slopes of the volcanoes. What I have here to represent her is something that the Hawaiians call Pele's hair. These are fine, fine strands that happen sometimes when the volcano erupts, and the eruption is so strong and it goes up so high in the air that the volcanic glass forms filaments, like very, very fine blonde hair. That's why Pele is often in stories called an ehu, kind of a reddish blonde or a blondish kind of hair. Pele is not the hard-cooled lava rocks. We clear that one up, okay? The rocks actually are an expression of Haumea. Didn't mention that. Stone is Haumea's element, the bones of the earth. Pele is the molten lava. And her name, Pele, means molten lava. And where Hina represents feminine wisdom, Pele represents feminine power. Okay? And in its strongest form, whether that is sexual power or whether that is anger or whether that is just passion, whoa, that's Pele. Okay? That's what she represents. And so this is a symbol of her. Now Pele is called upon for all the things that fire might be good for, which is heat, which is movement, which is change and transformation. All of those have to do with Pele. So she's the element of fire, of course. Right. Now I'll pick this up. Okay. The next one is Pele's sister. Now Pele's sister is known as Hiyaka Ikapolio Pele, or sometimes just Hiyaka. Now in some of the stories there are 8 Hiyaka sisters. In some stories there are 24 Hiyaka sisters, depends on the stories. But the oldest of the stories say Pele only had one sister and her name was Hiyaka. And what the Hawaiians would like to do is they would take an akua that was very powerful and they'd make all kinds of names for different aspects of the power. And some Western anthropologists come in and think that they're talking about separate individual goddesses, but they're not. They're talking about aspects of the same power. And so there's lots of Hiyakas, but all the Hiyakas have cloud forms because Pele gathered her family around her, and her family consisted of gods and goddesses with all the different attributes of volcanic activity. So there was fire, thunder, lightning, clouds, colored clouds, winds, all kinds of things. Pele was a master or a mistress of winds. In some of the tales, she knew the names of all the winds, could call them up all up at will. And Hiyaka was her sister. And when it says Hiyaka Ikapolio Pele, the literal translation is Hiyaka in the armpit of Pele. That's what Poli means. The missionaries didn't like armpit very much, so they changed it to Hiyaka in the bosom of Pele, to try and give an idea of how well loved Hiyaka was. But if we get to real traditional Hawaiian, the armpit is a euphemism. And so Hiyaka was supposed to have been carried here in the form of an egg by Pele. Well, yes, I can understand that very well, because one of the other meanings, figurative meanings of an armpit is the womb. And so Hiyaka may very well have been Pele's daughter. Since the stories talk about an affair she had that got her kicked out of her homeland, that's still not too far-fetched. At any rate, that's a possibility, because you can translate things so many different ways in Hawaiian. Now, Hiyaka is strongly acquainted with the wind and traveling, and she's also a healer, and a real healer. She brought Lohiau back to life, a chief of Kauai, back to life twice. Once when he had killed himself, and once when he was killed by Pele, and she brought him back to life. She did lots of different healings. She battled sorcerers. She helped people. She was quite a remarkable woman. And this is not the kind of fern, so this is just kind of representative. Her form, body forms, are a number of them. The Ohi'alehua, which is a flower that of a big tree, hardwood that grows in the islands, but also several types of fern, types of lacy ferns. So sometimes if you're out in the wilds in a place where it's very wet and the stream is going or the waterfall's dripping and you see these very lacy type of ferns around, they're a favorite of hula dancers to put in there to make leis out of, and that's another form of Hiyaka. Okay? So Hiyaka as a healer, Hiyaka as with the element of wind, and that has to do with change and movement. Okay? So after Hiyaka, let's see, Laka. Yes, okay. Use this for Laka. Laka is considered to be the patron of the hula. Laka was a goddess of the forests and is associated with quite a few different forest plants. Now, these plants aren't readily available, so I didn't have them with me tonight. But what we have here is a kumu hula. This is a hula teacher. And a kumu hula means more than a hula teacher. It's someone who carries the tradition, teaches the people how to dance, knows the esoteric understanding of the hula in the real traditional forms. So anyway, this is a kumu hula, and she's wearing two of the body forms that are the most very strong and important body forms of Laka. And one of them is Mele, that she's wearing around her neck. And the other one is Ilima blossoms that she has in a lei that is put on her hat. Okay? Ilima is a beautiful golden yellow flower that doesn't last very long as a blossom, as a lei, but it's so beautiful. It was well loved by royalty and also well loved by people involved in hula. Okay? So this is Laka. This isn't Laka, but this is a representation of her. And in the traditional hula, when they're doing a real traditional hula, they'll have an altar for her, and they will always put a whole succession of plants, starting with llama wood, which is a type of ebony, and it's usually the heart of it, which is a yellow wood, wrapped in yellow tapa cloth. And then a whole succession of different plants, ferns and other things that are part of the traditional presentation to honor Laka. Curiously enough, though, as far as I know, now some kumu hula could come up and undo me right now, but as far as I know, even though she's the patroness, even though she's honored always some way in the dance, there are no hulas that are in her name, to my knowledge. When they finish a traditional hula, it's Hei noa I ka polio Pele, or Hiyaka I ka noa, how do you say that? Hei noa no, Hei noa no, Hiyaka I ka polio Pele, which would be, this is in honor of the name of Hiyaka I ka polio Pele. But there are none for Laka, which is very strange. Some of the traditions say that Laka and her brother Laka came from the far south, perhaps Tahiti, and that they brought the hula with them. Others say that she came alone and brought the hula. Other, of course, traditions in the Pele tradition say that the hula was invented here. So there's lots of different ways of saying it. But anyway, lots of old stories of Laka. And on Molokai, they say Laka was here long before Pele was. So that's that goddess. Now, her element is plants. And of course, one of the significant aspects of plant is the ability to reproduce and grow. And so these are the kinds of qualities that might be used in healing. As well as Hiyaka is the goddess of love. And she's described that way in different stories and writings. And so anything that has to do with love and aloha and all of its aspects, why, she's the patron of that. Now another is Kapo. Kapo ula kina'u is her full name. Kapo is a very, very old goddess. Again, Molokai stories say that Kapo was, again, came before Pele. Pele stories say that Kapo was a sister of Pele. What we do know is that Pele had some great powers. One of her most curious powers, now this sounds really strange from looking at it from other traditions, because I've never run across this anywhere else. Kapo had the ability to detach her vagina and send it flying off someplace. And she used that once, at least once, when a pig god, Kamapua'a, was about to rape Pele. Kapo detached her vagina, sent it flying past his nose, and he left Pele alone, went chasing off after the vagina, all the way over to Oahu, and forgot all about Pele. So that was one use. She had the ability to transform herself in many types of different animals, especially many, many types of birds. Okay? And so, but any kind of animal. She had great power to do that. She had also the power, it was the power of magic, of psychic ability. She had the power of clairvoyance. She had the power, she was a goddess who channeled through people. So she's been associated with psychic things and dreams and dreaming. And when Hiyaka went to try and bring Lohiau back from the realm of the dead, it was Kapo that she asked for help because of all her powerful psychic abilities. Now, so this bird represents Kapo, and we often use the color blue in association with her. So this is just a representation because of all her different forms, and especially bird forms that she would use. Okay? So when there's any kind of telepathic connections to make in healing, why Kapo is one that's used and asked for help in that way.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
You said Kapi could channel through people.
Yes.
Channeling means that channel simply being channeled through you, and
Yes.
then you convey the information. And you're saying she channeled through some other people, or
Yes.
how? How does it work?
We'll talk about that later. Okay? So anyway, that's one of the abilities of Kapo. And the last one is, am I right here? Ah, yes, I have another, I know what happened here. I have another body form. Oh yeah, okay. I have another body form of Kapo, that's all. And this is very curious. Anyway, the Halapepe. Now the Halapepe, this is not Kapo. The Halapepe is a body form of Uli. That's the last one. This is just a leaf of the Halapepe. It's a plant that looks something like the lauhala, like the hala plant. If some of you are familiar with those, that they use for matting, that they use make hats out of, that they use make all kinds of things out of. This is, looks something like that, but it's a lot smaller. Yeah, get my ideas straight. The Halapepe is one of the body forms of Uli, the last goddess that we're talking about. Now, Uli means dark and can refer to any dark color. But Uli also had forms. Mostly her forms were forms that came from someplace else. Because she was strange and considered like a foreigner sometimes. Her realm was magic. Sometimes sorcerers used her, but her real realm was just magic, and that means manifesting. And this is the great power that she had. She was sometimes considered the wife of Lono. But she is a very, very old goddess involved with manifesting and very popular among the Mo'o people as well. And so her element then was people, because most of her affairs have to do with people and human activities and the things that human beings want to do or have or be. And so this is where Uli comes in, when something has to be manifested that isn't there right now. Okay? So there's a brief introduction to Hawaiian goddesses. Questions on them?
I have a question.
Sure.
Why is the rock wrapped with a piece of string?
The reason this rock is wrapped with a piece, it's not string actually, it's hau. And because this rock was given to me as a gift representing Haumea. So it's hau is one of her forms. It's a plant that rope and string was made from and grows down in great abundance by the rivers and things like that. So this was a Haumea gift that someone gave me. Okay.